On September 1st, the exact same prompt you were running in June will cost you up to 40% more, and Anthropic isn't raising prices to do it. And separately, if your code sets one very common parameter, it isn't waiting for September, it's throwing errors right now. Claude Sonnet 5 shipped at the end of June, and it is genuinely excellent, near Opus class quality at Sonnet prices. But hiding inside the upgrade are 3 breaking changes and 1 silent cost shift, and the internet has covered them in blog posts while almost nobody has walked them through properly on video. That ends today. Here's the shape of it: 2 deadlines. August 31st, the introductory pricing window closes, and the discount that's currently masking the cost shift disappears. September 1st, standard rates return, and the hidden change underneath, a new tokenizer, keeps charging you for roughly a third more tokens on the same text forever. Between now and then is the cheap window to migrate, measure, and recalibrate. This video is the complete walkthrough: what Sonnet 5 actually is, the 3 changes that break code, the tokenizer that bends your bill, a 15-minute migration checklist, and an honest answer to switch or wait. Let's go. Chapter 1: What Sonnet 5 actually is, because the capability story is real and deserves its due before we get to the traps. Released June 30th, it's now the default model on the free and pro plans, and it is the most agentic Sonnet Anthropic has shipped. On the flagship agentic coding benchmark, it scores 63.2%, 5 points above its predecessor Sonnet 4.6, and 6 points below Opus 4.8, the top of the line. And on certain knowledge work benchmarks, remarkably, it slightly outperforms Opus. Near Opus capability at Sonnet prices, that's the pitch, and the numbers back it. The specifications that matter for builders. The million token context window is now the default and the maximum. There's no smaller variant, with output up to 128,000 tokens. It keeps everything Sonnet 4.6 supported: prompt caching, batch processing, vision, the files interface, structured outputs. 2 exceptions to note now because they decide migrations later. The priority tier for latency guarantees is not available on Sonnet 5, and on the Amazon side, it does not run on legacy Bedrock's invoke model path. It requires the newer Claude platform integration. If either of those is load-bearing for you, remember this moment. So let's be precise about what kind of video this is. This is not a takedown. The model is a genuine upgrade with the biggest gains exactly where Sonnet class costs matter most: coding and agentic work. The problem is the word drop in. The migration guide's first line is, change the model name. And for a lucky minority, that's true. For everyone else, 3 specific changes will either hard fail your code with errors or quietly change its behavior and its bill. Here they come, in order of how loudly they fail. Chapter 2: Breaking change 1. The loud one. The sampling parameters are gone. Temperature top P top K. The dials builders have tuned since the earliest API days. On Sonnet 5, setting any of them to a non-default value returns a 400 error, not a deprecation warning. A hard failure on the request every time. And notice who this catches: both ends of the spectrum simultaneously. The team that raised temperature for creative variation in generated content, and the team that pinned it to exactly 0 chasing determinism for consistency-critical tasks. Opposite intentions, identical failure. The replacement path per the official guidance is system prompt instructions. Describe the behavior you want: more varied, more conservative, more consistent, in words rather than dials. The model's internal reasoning architecture now manages its own sampling, and external overrides conflict with it. One nuance that makes this genuinely dangerous in mixed infrastructure: the failure mode depends on your route. Call Anthropic's API directly, and you get the 400 error: loud, immediate, debuggable. Route through a popular aggregator like OpenRouter, and the same parameters are silently ignored. The request succeeds, the dials just do nothing. Same bug, 2 completely different symptoms. If your stack uses both paths, you can have half your fleet erroring and the other half quietly drifting, and no single log line that explains why. Search your codebase for these 3 parameter names before you migrate, not after. Let's make it concrete with the before and after. Before, a request setting the model to Sonnet 4.6, temperature raised for variation. After on Sonnet 5, the temperature line is simply deleted and the system prompt gains a sentence. Vary your phrasing and approach across responses. That's the whole pattern. The determinism crowd mirrors it. Delete the zero and instruct. Answer consistently. Prefer the same formulation for the same input. It feels less precise than a number, and in exchange, the model's own reasoning machinery stops fighting an external override it can no longer honor. Chapter 3, Breaking Change 2, Manual Extended Thinking is gone. If your code enables thinking with an explicit token budget, the syntax that was already deprecated on Sonnet 4.6, Sonnet 5 removes it entirely. 400 error. The replacement is adaptive thinking, where the model itself decides how much reasoning each request needs, steered by a single new dial, the effort parameter. Effort is worth learning properly because it's now your main lever for the quality cost latency triangle. The levels run from low through medium and high up to a brand new level, xhigh, slotted between high and the maximum. Higher effort means deeper reasoning and better results on hard problems, and more thinking tokens on your bill. The mental model shift. You used to buy a fixed thinking budget whether the request needed it or not. Now the model spends adaptively, and you set the ceiling of ambition. For speed-critical paths where reasoning is pure overhead, you can disable thinking explicitly, and that option matters more than it used to, for a reason the next chapter makes clear. Chapter 4, Breaking Change 3, and this is the sneaky one because it throws no error at all. On Sonnet 4.6, a request with no thinking field ran without thinking. On Sonnet 5, the identical request runs with adaptive thinking, on by default. Your code didn't change. Its behavior did. Two consequences arrive together. First, the shape of responses changes. Thinking blocks now appear before the text, and anything downstream that parses responses positionally needs to know that. Second, and costlier, max tokens is a hard cap on total output, thinking plus response text combined. If you sized your limit for response text only, calibrated against a model that wasn't thinking, the thinking can now consume the budget and truncate your actual answer, mid-sentence in production, with no error anywhere. If you take exactly one action from this chapter, revisit every max tokens value that was tuned on Sonnet 4.6, and add an explicit thinking disabled setting on any path where reasoning is pure cost. And because old habits from the certification series die hard, here's the exam lens. After migrating, your extraction pipeline's responses start arriving truncated mid-JSON, with no errors logged anywhere. For suspects, the new tokenizer inflated the input, the sampling parameter removal, adaptive thinking consuming the max tokens budget before the answer finishes, or a rate limit. The tokenizer inflates counts but doesn't truncate output. Sampling removal fails loud with 400s and we said no errors. Rate limits reject requests, they don't shorten them. Adaptive thinking on by default, eating a max tokens cap sized for text only. That's your culprit, and the fix is the explicit disable or a bigger cap. One diagnosis question, 3 distractor species, and the silent default caught red-handed. Chapter 5, the tokenizer, the change nobody's code touches and everybody's bill feels. Sonnet 5 adopts a new tokenizer, the one from the Opus 4.8 line, and it maps the same text to roughly 30% more tokens, in some measurements up to 35 or 40. Same prompt, same characters, more tokens, and you're building tokens. It hits unevenly, too. English, Spanish, and code are hit hardest, so the typical developer workload sits at the expensive end of the range. Now the September arithmetic, and why the intro window is a migration incentive rather than a gift. Through August 31st, Sonnet 5 costs $2 per million input tokens and 10 per million output, a third off the standard rate. That discount roughly cancels the tokenizer increase. Migrate today and an equivalent request costs about what it did on 4.6. On September 1st, pricing returns to the standard 3 and 15, the same sticker price as before, but the token counts do not revert. Net effect, the same prompt can cost up to 40% more than it did in June, at an unchanged advertised price. That's the bill shock, and it's not a price rise, it's a measurement change. And the tokenizer's blast radius goes beyond the invoice. Every number you calibrated in tokens is now wrong. rate limit budgets, context truncation guards, cost projections, and subtly, prompt caching breakpoints because cached token counts change too, so your cache boundaries may no longer sit where you designed them. The fix is mechanical but mandatory. Rerun token counting against Sonnet 5 with your real representative prompts, using the token counting API, and recalibrate everything that consumed the old numbers. Do it inside the cheap window while mistakes are discounted. Two familiar levers still stack on top of all this arithmetic, and they matter more now, not less. Prompt caching, up to 90% off cached input, and with every prompt now tokenizing longer, the stable prefix you cache is worth more per request than it was in June. And batch processing still halves the price of anything latency tolerant. If the tokenizer is the tide coming in, caching and batching are the levees, and they're the same levees the developer certification video taught, doing exactly the same job one model generation later. Chapter 6, the migration itself, and here's the good news. For most code bases this is an afternoon at most, and often genuinely 50 minutes once you know where to look. 6 items. 1. Swap the model name to Sonnet 5. 2. Search for temperature, top P and top K, and remove every non-default setting, and code the intent in the system prompt instead. 3. Replace any manual thinking budget with adaptive thinking and an effort level, and explicitly disable thinking on speed-critical paths. 4. Recount tokens on your real prompts and reset every budget, guard, and cache breakpoint that depended on the old counts. 5. Audit max tokens everywhere, remembering thinking now shares the cap. 6. Check your infrastructure exceptions. Legacy Bedrock's invoke model path won't run it, and priority tier isn't offered. 2 accelerators worth knowing. Claude Code ships a migrate command that automates the mechanical parts and hands you a verification checklist for the rest. And if you're jumping from something older than 4.6 budget extra, there are additional changes like legacy beta headers to remove, so read the full official migration guide, which is linked in the description and is, as always with this channel, the primary source. Chapter 7, Switch or Wait. First, the decision most teams actually face. Sonnet 5 versus staying on 4.6 versus paying for Opus 4.8. The clean way to decide is the certification series' oldest instinct: run your own golden set. 20 representative tasks, both models, compare accuracy, latency, and true cost per request under the new token counts. An afternoon of measurement beats a month of benchmark table debates, and the discount window makes the experiment cheap. That's not just migration advice, that's the evaluation discipline this channel keeps preaching, applied to the most common decision of this quarter. The verdict, honestly: switch now inside the discount window. If you run agentic or code-heavy workloads, that's where the gains concentrate, and where near-Opus quality at Sonnet pricing is simply free capability. Switch now if your 4.6 workload keeps stalling on hard tasks and Opus pricing was the blocker. And switch deliberately even if you plan to stay on 4.6 long-term, because measuring your real costs on the new Tokenizer, while it's discounted, is information you'll want before September, not after. Wait or plan carefully if you depend on the priority tier's latency guarantees, if you're pinned to legacy Bedrock integration paths, or if your product's behavior depends on precise temperature control you haven't yet re-engineered as prompt guidance. And whatever you choose, the one action with a hard deadline is the measurement. After September 1st, every unaudited token budget is a small invoice surprise waiting to compound. That's Sonnet 5 complete, a genuinely strong model, 3 breaking changes, 1 silent default, a tokenizer that bends your bill on September 1st, and a 50-minute checklist that diffuses all of it. Everything here is checked against Anthropic's official announcement, platform documentation, and migration guide, all linked below, and as always, verify against the current docs before you ship because this information moves fast. Independent content not affiliated with Anthropic. And here's what's next, because this channel is about to go deeper. The Claude Certified series taught the exams, the next series teaches the infrastructure the whole agentic era runs on, the Model Context Protocol. MCP just graduated from experiment to industry standard, vendor-neutral foundation, enterprise adoption up 12-fold, and it's now the plumbing under everything from Claude Code to enterprise agents. The MCP Blueprint series starts soon. What it actually is now, building a server properly and the security architecture nobody teaches. Subscribe so part 1 lands in your feed the day it ships. We're building AI up from the ground, one blueprint at a time. I'll see you in the next one.